This podcast is brought to you by Knowledge at Wharton. Please visit knowledge.wharton.upenn.edu for more information.
Seth Berger is founder and former CEO of &1, a company specializing in basketball shoes and apparel. He and several classmates founded the business while they were students at Wharton in the early 1990s. &1's original product line featured T-shirts targeted at young basketball players and later expanded to offer a full line of apparel. Under his leadership, revenue rose from $1 million in 1993 to more than $200 million in 2001. In 2005, Seth sold &1 to American Sporting Goods, a private shoe company based in California. He is currently the head boys varsity basketball coach at the Westtown School in Westtown, Pennsylvania. He agreed to talk with us today about what it takes to build a successful company. Seth, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mandy.
To start off, successful entrepreneurship is all about seizing the right opportunity at the right time. So where did you get your idea for the business, and how did you know that it was the right time to pursue that opportunity?
My idea came while I was here at Wharton. When I was in grad school, I did an advanced study project for a business plan called The Hoop, initially actually, which was a basketball retail store in a class with Miles Bass, who teaches undergrads. A great teacher. And in my second year of grad school, I morphed that business plan into a database business targeted at basketball players. I actually left school when I graduated to do the wrong business at the wrong time, which was a basketball database business. And in about 3 weeks, I realized that I was broke and I was going to stay broke unless I changed my business idea very quickly. So what my partners and I felt at that time was that in the sports and the footwear and apparel industry, there were lots of companies that did multi-sport. So Nike, Adidas, Reebok at the time would do, basketball, football, tennis, soccer, whatever it might be. But no one was focusing just on the basketball player. So we felt we could niche an industry in its biggest category in basketball. The second part of your question, in terms of knowing that it's the right time, I don't think we ever knew. And I also think we got very lucky with a few things that happened. Michael Jordan retiring, Latrell Sprewell having a great playoff run just after we'd signed him. So there are lots of things, I think, when the ball bounces your way that end up, in hindsight, you say, oh, that was the right time. But when you're sitting there, you're kind of crossing your fingers saying, I really hope this is the right time.
Right, absolutely. After launching &1, what challenges did you and your business face, and how did you overcome these challenges?
That's a hard question because I think everything was a challenge. When we started, we had no experience, first and foremost. So none of us had experience in clothing or footwear. So the biggest challenge, I think, for us was figuring out what the right questions to ask were. Right, once you know what the right questions to ask are, you can always find the answers. But I had 2 or 3 partners, they were really, really smart kids. I mean, one was a Wharton undergrad with a 3.96 GPA. The other kid had gone to Stanford, and then you had me. And I was, looking at these guys for not only the questions, and then we'd figure out the answers. So the first hurdle we had was lack of experience. The second hurdle we had was that we were young. And so when we'd walk into a room at 25, and 23 years old and say, we're here to show you product that we can produce over in China and we can deliver to your factory within 4 months, they would look at us and say, no, you can't do that. You're kids. And then once you get past the hurdle of, hey, we delivered what we say we were going to deliver and people trust you, then we got past that challenge of being young. On the flip side of the challenge of being young, I think it's a huge opportunity. Whenever I speak with undergrads or grads, I always try to tell them, you should go start your business now before you have a bunch of experience, because what your experience will tell you is what you can't accomplish. And when you graduate from Penn or Wharton at 21 or 25, you have no idea what you can't do in the world. You think you can do anything. And so that's the best time to go start a business. When you're 40, you're looking back saying, wow, how did we get that done? That was insane.
So you mentioned that part of being the right time is having Michael Jordan retire. Yes. When your business was starting. Why was that such an opportunity for you?
It was literally in the fall of '93. I remember we were riding to a friend's high school to give a talk on what the first couple months of starting a business had been like. And I hear over the radio that this is October, that Michael Jordan has retired from basketball. Jordan at the time was almost as big as it is today in terms of being a dominant player in basketball. So immediately, retailers had hundreds of millions of dollars of Jordan clothing that they wanted to replace because they thought no one was going to buy it because he had retired. And actually, the first time Jordan retired, his sales went like this. Since the second time he retired, Jordan's continued to grow and grow and grow. But for the first couple of years after Mike stepped out, it created a huge opportunity for us when consumers and retailers wanted something different. So if Mike had not decided for whatever reason to retire, you wouldn't be interviewing me today.
Wow. So how did you seize that opportunity and provide products that the consumers wanted?
How we seized the opportunity really was luck, in that we were doing what we thought was the right thing in terms of putting out a product that the consumer wanted. I think you're asking let me try to answer the question a little differently, okay? We knew our consumer extremely well because we were a consumer. So when we created basketball apparel and footwear, we thought we knew what a ball player wanted. At 25, I was just kind of on the edge of the target consumer being 16 to 18-year-old ball player. Now I couldn't tell you what those kids want, but back then we thought we knew. So the most important thing for us was knowing our consumer, then putting out a product that we thought he would want. Then what happened was, in our first shipment in November, it was a disaster. We literally did shirts, and the colors of the shirts were the screen print, was lime green and purple. I mean, just ridiculous stuff. So the stuff didn't really sell. They gave us another chance. We came back in the spring and we fixed the colors, and literally our stuff flew off the retailers. Within 3 weeks, they were completely sold out. We went in February from being in 10 Foot Lockers to in June being in 1,500 Foot Lockers across the country of 1994. So we went in 4 months from being zero in the t-shirt market to being their #2 basketball supplier.
Right. Like you mentioned, And One targets a very specific market, the niche market of 16 to 18-year-old basketball players. How did you cater to this market, and what kinds of strategies did your company employ in order to market to this very specific group of consumers?
Right. First is our product was our biggest marketing. With a small company with limited budget, the biggest way to message to your consumer is actually your product. So our product had to be a combination of product that would be great to wear and actually say something to the consumer so he could represent himself as a basketball player. So that was the first thing. Second, and that goes back to knowing your consumer. We would focus group. So our focus group wouldn't be in, no disrespect, a Wharton office, right? We would take our stuff out to the basketball courts. And we go to courts all across the country and ask kids, which of these shirts do you like? Which of these shorts do you like? Which of these shoes do you like? So our first filter in our company, and as we grew, we continued to hire young basketball players in our product and marketing area. So we hired kids from Penn, from Stanford, from Haverford, all who played ball, and they would be our first filter. If our stuff can't get by them, it's not getting out the door. Then once they get by them, we go to the kids who were going to be buying it 6-9 months down the road. And they told us what were our best products, as opposed to us deciding, I like that one the best. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what I like the best, because when I was getting to be 27, 30, 32, it really didn't matter. It matters what that 16-year-old kid likes.
Given that the retail industry is so competitive and your brand succeeded in the retail space, how did you distinguish And One from other brands, and what marketing strategies did you employ?
First, the most important thing was that And One was a basketball-only brand. So we felt that we couldn't occupy the consumer's mind for all of footwear and apparel and athletics. But we wanted to make sure that when you thought of basketball, you thought of And One first, okay? And if you thought about soccer or tennis, we didn't want you thinking about our brand. In fact, some folks would say, I don't know what And One means. I'm not going to buy that. We'd say, great. If you don't know what And One means, then you shouldn't be buying our product. We don't want you wearing it anyway. And so that was, niching it to that consumer was, I think, probably the thing that started us on the right path, kept us going. And then actually, when we veered away from that path later, it really kind of screwed us up as a company.
And I know that your company developed an entertainment division that did a lot of promotions for the company. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's fun. Skip to Malou, Ray for Alston, is an NBA player today. I knew Skip when he was, back in the city at 7. He was younger than that. But everyone started to know him when he was 17. And he had been around a bunch of different high schools before he went to Fresno State. He was a great basketball player. So we actually had sponsored the Rucker All-Star Game, which is a great game in New York City, playground ball players. And we had these tapes of Skip and some other great ball players. There's one All-Star game, had Conrad McRae, Skip, Kareem Reed, a kid named the Predator. I mean, it was an unbelievable All-Star game. we had these tapes, and actually a kid who's probably about your age was working at an ad agency and said, why don't you make a mixtape of those games? Put it to music, because you may see this basketball all the time because you're from New York, but folks outside the city have never seen this kind of basketball. So we made a tape. We gave 50,000 tapes away. It was the fastest promotion, most successful promotion in a weekend foot action it ever had. And then the ball players actually said, you know what, why don't we host some games? So first it was some kid's idea, and then the ball players themselves said, why don't we host some games? The first game we hosted at Hunter College was, we had Mos Def did a concert after the game. I mean, it was jam-packed in the summertime. And then from there, we approached ESPN, said, look, we got this idea for a tour, for a TV show. It was kind of early on the reality thing. And they ran with it. Actually, in its second or third year, street ball was a better performer for ESPN than SportsCenter among teen males.
You mentioned that moving away from your core product was actually detrimental to your business. Could you explain that a little bit further?
Sure. When you start to grow as a business, one of the things you want to do is keep growing and be as big as you possibly can be. And that conflicts with continuing to be true to who you are as a company and servicing the same consumer. So as a basketball brand, as a young teen male basketball brand, we started to feel like it was only so big we could get. So we started to do other products. We did a slip-on shoe. We did a training shoe. We started to do training clothing. And I really feel that it diluted our brand. We started to alter our logo so it wasn't so basketball only. And the idea was, hey, we need to enable more consumers to feel that they can buy our product. I actually think that started our slide down. And when we really, should have said, look, you know what? If we can be a $200, $300, $400, $500 million company, and it might take us 10 years to get there, and that's as big as we can be, that's doing the right thing for the consumer versus saying, I want to be a $500 million company in 2 years. We need to expand our product line. And you kind of forget why the consumer likes you. You know what I mean?
So instead of expanding horizontally, what did you do to ensure that your business had scalability in your target consumer market?
Mm-hmm. We did. I mean, the point is, what you just said is, when we went vertical, okay, we realized that, you know what, this business has a limited size. At our height in 2001, with our licensees, we were about $285 million. We did 210, or maybe a little bit more. We did 210. Our licensees did somewhere between 70 and 90. And we're in an industry where we're competing with $1 billion, $2 billion, $12 billion companies, and they can spend so much more in marketing. So we felt like we needed to generate more money so we could spend more money in marketing. And I think the mistake we made was saying, you know what? If we can be a very profitable $300 million company, that's great. Let's do that. And if we want to grow, what we should be doing is buying other brands that have different meaning to their consumers. So let's buy a running brand. Let's buy a fashion brand, as opposed to trying to make N1 broader to the consumer. I think Nike's done probably the only brand in the footwear and apparel industry that's done a really good job of being true to itself as an athletic brand and yet somehow being able to bridge the fashion gap is Nike. Adidas tried it, they failed. Reebok did it, they failed. Under Armour's going to try, and I hope they succeed because Kevin's a good friend of mine, but I'm not so sure. But Nike has always said, in terms of their marketing, all they will say is athlete, 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 athlete. And that enables, people my age to wear a swoosh and think, oh, I look like an athlete now, right? And yet somehow that's become very fashionable. And I think they're the only ones that have been able to do it.
What would you say is your worst experience while building N1, and what was your best experience?
Wow, I don't know that I had a worst experience. I can give you a moment of horror. It wasn't the worst experience. We had signed Stephon Marbury from Georgia Tech. He graduated, left as a freshman, played for the Minnesota Timberwolves. He was our first sneaker endorser. He was number 4 or 5 pick in the, I think 5th pick in the NBA draft. I think Ray Allen was 4th. So we're invited by the Timberwolves to sit courtside to watch Steph play his first regular season game. We had done a massive national TV campaign, gave away 10,000 t-shirts at the Target Center, and the campaign was called Breaking Ankles with Stephon Marbury. He's supposed to, breaking ankles, I'm supposed to cross you over and I break your ankles. So he's having a good first quarter. He's starting, him and Garnett. They're playing relatively well, and about 5 minutes into the first quarter, he comes down on Cadillac Anderson. Now, Cadillac Anderson is like 7 feet, and he's not a great player, but his foot's literally, makes Shaq look small. It's like comes down on Cadillac Anderson's foot, rolls his ankle, breaks it. Crying on the court, they pick up Steph, carry him over, and they literally sit him down right next to us because they had set us down at the end of the Timberwolves bench. Steph looks at me, I look at him, you know, and he's thinking, these shoes stink, right? And I'm thinking, what the heck were you doing trying to drive on Cadillac Anderson? But we have $6 million in shoes on the water at that time. And the shoes are due to hit our warehouse the next week and then get shipped out to retailers. So now I literally call my director of marketing back home and I say, Aaron, it's been a great run. Just so you know, there's a really good chance we're going to go bankrupt because we can't float these shoes if the retailer's shipping back to us, and Marbury ain't going to be on the court for 4 months. So that was a moment of horror, right? It all worked out. He actually was out for 4 months with a broken ankle, and we got ripped in the media for our campaign, Breaking Ankles. And I would say I really don't know if there was a best moment. There are so many. I mean, the whole experience of Van1 was incredible. You know, 12 years with great people and way more successful than we had ever imagined. I think if I thought of one moment, though, it was the first time I saw a kid wearing our T-shirt. And it was actually a 12-year-old girl at a Hoop It Up. As I was out that first summer and hadn't seen anyone really wearing it, and I saw this 12-year-old girl at a Hoop It Up, and you know, she was like an absolute hardcore ball player. It's like, oh, perfect, our target consumer right here, a hardcore basketball player wearing N1. She had cut the sleeves off and, you know, was trying to look decent. It was great.
Clearly, you've experienced a lot of success in a very competitive industry. If you were to start another company today, what would it be?
I don't know. I really don't think I would do that, actually. In the last, we sold the business in 2005, and I've got 3 young kids, and I've been coaching high school basketball. I've had 3 or 4 opportunities to do really cool things, and each time I've come to that, I decided that the time with my kids and the time that I'm spending with the kids at my high school, because I coach them 6 months during the year, are more valuable than starting another business.
Right. What do you think is the next big thing then in the athletic apparel industry?
I think it's going to get even more vertical. Towards the end of our run, the dynamics of the industry got very difficult. So you had sneaker factories were squeezing the vendors, who were squeezing the retailers, who were squeezing the consumer, and then everyone's squeezing back. So it's very difficult these days to be actually a successful vendor, meaning a Nike or a Reebok. Okay, the margins are too slim. And also have margin for the retailer, Foot Locker, Foot Action. I think you've seen a lot of consolidation. I think at a certain point, there's going to be some funky combination of internet retail manufacturer where either Nike or Adidas or UA is going to say to Foot Locker and Champs and JCPenney, we're going to open up 1,000 of our own stores. And we no longer need you as a pass-through to the consumer. The internet has, I think, sped the availability of information to the consumer now. That at this point, the consumer must know that for that $100 shoe, they're spending an extra $40 that they don't need to spend because it's passing through too many hands. So I think, you know, and it might even start over in China because they're starting to lose some business to other nations. They might say, look, you know what? We're going to buy a brand and we're going to have the vendor and we're going to own a retailer so that we can deliver a shoe that a kid would be spending $100 on for $60. That has to happen. I think that's probably the next stage.
In terms of brand marketing, there has been a lot of hype in the business world around advertising during the Beijing Olympics. What's your take on marketing athletic brands through this event? And given that there's so much competition for advertising, do you think that it's a worthwhile pursuit for athletic brands?
I think it's worthwhile for Nike, and I think everyone else is wasting their money.
Why is that?
At the end of the day, athletes are associated with the brands that they wear. Kids don't really care who put the commercial on, right? At the end of the day, they know LeBron James wears a Nike shoe, right? So Adidas, Reebok, anyone else could sponsor, quote unquote, sponsor the Olympics. And actually it happened in Atlanta. You're way too young to remember, but in Atlanta, one of the other brands sponsored the Olympics, and Nike just flooded the Olympics. They had Michael Johnson was wearing a golden shoe when he broke the record running the 400. No one knew that Reebok had sponsored the Olympics. No one cared because the athletes were wearing Nike. So Nike, and to a lesser extent Adidas, I think it makes sense for them to invest. Everyone else, I mean, they should take that money and go put it on number 8 on the roulette wheel. It's better spent.
As a successful entrepreneur, what advice do you have for students who are interested in starting a business?
You know, start a business before you go get a job. And here's the reason. If you go get a job, you're going to succeed. and you're going to come out of school. If you come out of Wharton, what do you make these days? 50 G's to start? You tell me. If you work for a bank or a consultant, something like that, right?
Yeah, 60K.
Okay,
for
great.
income.
So you started making 60. So let's say you're 21 years old, you get out of school making 60,000 bucks, right? And you do real well, and 3 years later they say, I'm gonna send you back to Wharton grad, and I'm gonna pay for you, then come back to work. When you come back, you're making $175. 5 years after that, you're gonna be making $500,000. You're gonna have a husband or a wife, 2 kids, nice car, summer home, country club. At what point are you gonna say, I'm gonna go start my own company? The answer is never, right? What you will do is work until you've made enough money somewhere in your 50s to go do something you really want to do. Instead of now, when you're broke, like when I got out of grad school, I drove a Honda Civic hatchback, was broke as a joke, and I didn't care, right? It just didn't matter. But once you get used to the good life, you won't go back. So if you're thinking about starting a business, start the day you graduate. You don't need experience, you don't need money, you don't need someone else to tell you you can do it. Just go start it before you get used to making all that money.
Great, Seth. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mindy.
For more information, please visit knowledge.wharton.upenn.edu.